I always thought I was the quiet one in the story, the background character. But lately, the people around me have started looking at me like they finally see the monster.
Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day.
Something's been seriously off with my parents lately, and it all started so quietly, I almost missed it. After school one afternoon, I walked into my mom's office like I always did when I needed advice. Normally, she'd look up with that soft smile she always had for me, ready to listen. But that day, she just nodded at me, past me, like I wasn't even there. I told her about the stupid fight I'd had with my girlfriend, waiting for the usual wisdom, the mom talk that always made things better. When I asked, "So what should I do?" she didn't meet my eyes. She just muttered, "I don't know. Just talk to her, I guess." Her voice, it wasn't cold, exactly. Just uncomfortable, distant. My stomach twisted. My mom always knew what to say. She was my person. So when I asked, "Are you okay?" and she just said, "Fine, just busy." While staring at a blank computer screen, I felt something crack inside me. But it got stranger. That night, at dinner, my dad looked up from his plate and asked how I was feeling about the fight. My dad, the man who usually considered good talk, sitting side by side watching TV without saying a word. I froze. Mom must have told him, right? But she wasn't even looking at us, just poking at her food like it had personally offended her. Dad leaned in gently, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "You don't seem fine," he said. "You can talk to me if you want." I didn't know what was weirder. Dad suddenly turning into Dr. Phil or Mom turning into a ghost. The next morning, I came downstairs and nearly dropped my backpack. Dad was in the kitchen cooking breakfast, not pouring cereal, actually making eggs and toast, and plating it nicely. "When did you start doing this?" I asked, squinting at him like he'd been replaced by some step-forward dad. "Thought I'd try," he said, smiling warmly, a smile that honestly looked wrong on his face, like it didn't belong there. Mom was sitting at the table holding the newspaper awkwardly, like someone trying to figure out what hands are for. She'd always been the one to ask how I was doing in the morning, to fuss over me eating. But now, she barely glanced up. By Thursday, the weirdness was suffocating. I failed a chemistry test and came home ready to collapse. I found Dad in the living room and just blurted everything out. How stressed I was, how college apps felt like a noose tightening, how I thought I was letting everyone down. And he listened. Not the nod and grunt kind of listening. Real listening. A contact. Gentle nods. Actual emotional feedback. My dad, when he hugged me, really hugged me. Tight, solid, familiar but not. I almost broke down right there. Later, I tried to talk to Mom, and she didn't even look up from her phone. "You'll do better next time," she said flatly. When I pushed, she got annoyed. This was the woman who once stayed up with me till 2 in the morning through panic attacks. Now she couldn't even pretend to care. So I started paying attention. Dad began doing all these soft, nurturing things Mom used to do. Mom kept forgetting the little things that defined her. No lunch notes. No, "How was your day?" Just blank stares and distracted gestures. And then I started catching these weird glances they threw at each other. Guilty, tense, like they were hiding something huge. Saturday, it got worse. Mom walked past my college essay with a half glance and a "looks fine." Dad, on the other hand, sat down with me, read every word, and gave emotional feedback like he'd been born to do it. Later, I found Mom in the garage awkwardly fiddling with Dad's tools like she didn't even know what they were for, while he was in the kitchen making some elaborate dinner she would usually make. They both gave me fake smiles when I asked what was going on. And honestly, those smiles scared me more than anything. By Sunday, I'd had enough. I marched into the living room. They were sitting on opposite ends of the couch like two strangers who happened to look like my parents. "Something's wrong," I said, "with both of you, and you need to tell me right now what it is." They froze, looked at each other, and then, Dad started crying. Real tears. My dad, the man who didn't cry at funerals. Mom buried her face in her hands, not crying, just shaking. "We can't," Dad whispered. "You won't believe us," Mom said. Her voice sounded like someone who'd already lost the fight. "Try me," I demanded. The silence after that was thick enough to choke on. And then, through streaming tears, Dad finally said it. "Something happened to us Tuesday morning. We woke up and we weren't ourselves anymore." My heart pounded. What does that even mean? Mom stood, took a step closer. Her face was pale, tight. "We're in each other's bodies." It hit me like a punch. And then I saw it. The way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. Exactly like Dad always did when he was uncomfortable. The way she crossed her arms over her chest with her hands tucked under. Another one of his unconscious habits. And Dad, sitting there with my mom's body, crying the way she cries during sad movies. Shoulders shaking. Big messy sobs. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or both. This sounded like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. But their faces, their fear looked real. My hands clenched into fists. I didn't know what terrified me more. That they were lying or that they were telling the truth. When I asked how this happened, they started talking over each other. Frantic, breathless. Dad described waking up wrong. Mom said everything felt heavy and strange. Their words crashed together. and I had to hold up my hand to shut them up before I lost my mind. I grabbed my notebook, the one I usually used for homework, because focusing on something felt better than falling apart. I wrote the date, then Tuesday morning. Start from the top, one at a time. Mom went first. She said she opened her eyes, felt like she was trapped in a too big, too heavy body. Dad nodded, saying he felt the opposite, small, light, alien. I wrote everything down. 2 columns. Chaos turned into shaky ink. They both told the same story. Staring into the mirror that morning, seeing each other's faces staring back, touching their own skin like strangers, avoiding each other for an hour because they didn't know how to even talk about it. But when I asked for specifics, their answers got fuzzy. Like they were describing a movie scene, not a real experience. My frustration grew with every half answer. They admitted they hadn't told me because they thought it would fix itself, that they didn't want to scare me. I felt the heat rise in my chest. You lied to me. For 5 days. I dug my pen so hard into the paper the tip almost tore through. When I asked if they'd told anyone else, doctor, therapist, anyone, they recoiled like I'd suggested jail time. They'd lock us up, Dad said. They'd think we're crazy, Mom added. They hadn't sought help. They hadn't even Googled it. I sat there staring at my messy notes, the words refused help circled twice, and realized I was 17 and completely unequipped to handle whatever this was. Their eyes were on me, desperate, scared, like I was supposed to fix everything. I wasn't sure if this was a nightmare or just the unraveling of my family. I finally whispered, I need time to think. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and leaned against it like it could keep reality out. The shadows from the street lamp painted strange shapes across my floor. My mind kept looping between they're lying and what if they're not. I grabbed my phone and opened the Notes app. If they were telling the truth, there had to be ways to test it: habits, reflexes, memories, muscle memory. Things no amount of acting could fake. I started a list, 20 different tests, all I could think of. But lying there in the dark, staring at my ceiling, it hit me. Whether they were lying or telling the truth, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I walked downstairs and froze in the doorway. My parents were already at the kitchen table, breakfast neatly laid out like something out of a commercial. Toast, eggs, orange juice. My dad calmly buttering his toast like this was the most normal thing in the world. I poured myself some orange juice and sat down, pretending this was just another morning. But inside my brain was spinning like a broken carousel. Once they both started eating, I cleared my throat. Hey, Dad. What was Mom's childhood dog's name? He looked up, slightly confused, but didn't hesitate. Biscuit, he said. Then I turned to Mom. What's Dad's favorite fishing spot? She barely blinked. The creek behind his uncle's old property up north. Both answers were spot on, which should have been reassuring. Except it wasn't. They'd been married for 20 years. Of course they knew basic trivia about each other. This told me nothing. My chest tightened with frustration. I thought this little quiz would give me some kind of clarity. Instead, it felt like hitting a wall. Dad got up to make more coffee, and I watched him closely. Too closely. 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Stirred exactly the way Mom did. Tap tap on the rim. Spoon in the sink. Mom, meanwhile, sat at the table with Dad's tablet, scrolling through headlines at lightning speed without actually reading. That distracted, half-present expression on her face, that was his thing, not hers. It wasn't just their personalities anymore. It was the little things, the muscle memory, the habits, the things you don't even think about doing. I wolfed down my breakfast without saying another word and left for school, my mind a tangled mess. I spent first period staring blankly at the whiteboard, the teacher's voice drifting past me like static. All I could picture was Dad making sugar-loaded coffee and Mom flipping through news like him. In chemistry, my pen hovered uselessly over blank paper. My teacher stopped at my desk, giving me that look, half concerned, half tired. You okay? She asked. I haven't been sleeping much, I mumbled, which was true, just not the whole truth. She told me to come see her after class to talk about retaking the test I'd bombed. I nodded. I heard none of it. By lunch, I couldn't even sit with my friends. I grabbed my tray, walked right past them, and settled at an empty table in the corner. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to a clean page, and started writing everything down. Mom's sudden distance, Dad's emotional shift, the guilty looks, the coffee, the tablet, the way they'd slowly swapped every tiny piece of themselves like someone had hit a cosmic exchange button. 2 full pages later, the mess in my head was now on paper, but it didn't help. If anything, it made the whole thing feel realer. I was still searching for a logical explanation that didn't involve body-swapping magic. But the more I wrote, the less it felt like there was a logical explanation. After school, I was heading to my car when Haley suddenly appeared beside me. She crossed her arms. Why have you been ignoring my texts? Oh, right, the fight. The girlfriend I was supposed to talk to. My stomach dropped. I stumbled through an excuse about family stuff. But when she asked what kind of family stuff, I froze. What was I supposed to say? Hey, my parents think they swapped bodies? She looked hurt. You've been shutting me out for days. I've been trying, and you've just disappeared. I felt guilt crawl up my spine, but frustration bubbled over it. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? Haley, I'm dealing with something really complicated right now, I snapped. She shot back immediately. Then talk to me about it. You wouldn't understand, I blurted out, and I instantly regretted it. Her face hardened. Her voice got shaky, louder. I want to understand, but you keep building these walls and expecting me to wait outside. Relationships don't work like that. People were walking past us, pretending not to listen. My throat tightened. I'm doing the best I can, I said. It's not enough, she whispered. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Call me when you're ready to actually be in this relationship. And just like that, she turned and walked away. I stood there like an idiot wanting to run after her. But what was I supposed to say? The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. I parked in the driveway and just sat there for a minute, forehead against the steering wheel, trying to get my breathing under control. I felt like I was losing everything. My grip on my family, my relationship, my sanity. When I finally walked inside, they were waiting for me. Both sitting at the kitchen table, slumped and exhausted, faces etched with guilt. I didn't need to hear them talk to know they'd been discussing me. Dad's voice was soft. Too soft. How are you holding up? I let out a shaky laugh that wasn't funny at all. I don't even know what I believe anymore. Whether you're serious about this body swap thing or if something's just really wrong with you both. Dad's face crumpled like I just hit him. Mom stared at the table like she wanted to disappear. Then she said, almost too quietly, maybe we should just try to act normal. See if it goes away. Something inside me snapped. Normal, I yelled. You've completely switched personalities. Lied to me all week. Made me think I was losing my mind. And now you want to just act normal? Are you kidding me? Mom flinched like the word stung. Dad started crying. Again, I hated myself a little for yelling. But I was so tired of being the only one trying to make sense of this. I told them we needed to deal with it. Not hide from it. Not pretend it would fix itself. They nodded. But their faces were blank. No plan. No answers. Just two people lost in their own nightmare. I grabbed my backpack and stormed upstairs, slamming the door harder than I meant to. That night, I lay in bed with my phone lighting up the dark. My search history read like a rabbit hole of desperation. Body swap real? Consciousness transfer science. Sudden personality change medical causes. Shared delusions couples. Page after page of sci-fi plots, medical jargon, and conspiracy garbage. Nothing solid. Nothing that explained why my mom drank bitter coffee and my dad tapped a spoon twice on the rim like it was second nature. Everything I found pointed to two possibilities. Either what they were claiming was impossible, or my parents were seriously, terrifyingly ill. Neither option felt survivable. Sometime past midnight, I dropped the phone on my pillow and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And I couldn't help thinking, what if the impossible was happening? Wednesday morning, I dragged myself down the stairs feeling like a zombie. I hadn't slept much, again, and my parents looked like they hadn't either. Dad was at the stove trying to make eggs, but the kitchen already smelled like burnt rubber and regret. Mom sat at the table, her phone in hand, but she wasn't scrolling, wasn't tapping, wasn't doing anything. Just staring at that dark screen with glassy, faraway eyes like she'd left the room without moving an inch. A wisp of smoke curled upward. The eggs were blackening fast. Dad didn't even notice until I walked over and turned the burner off myself. He just blinked down at the ruined breakfast like he couldn't figure out how it got that way. Mom didn't even look up. Not once. I grabbed a granola bar, sat across from her, and just watched. No flicker of recognition. No frown. No blink. Just that blank stare. It was like looking at someone who'd been unplugged. I needed to shake something loose, so I tried a new approach. Hey, Dad, I said, keeping my tone casual. Remember that beach trip we took 5 years ago? His face lit up faintly as he started telling the story. But within seconds, the details were wrong. 2 weeks instead of 10 days. A blue house instead of white with green shutters. Deep-sea fishing that never happened. Every time he messed something up, I caught it in Mom's face. Her jaw tightening, fingers gripping the phone harder. She wanted to correct him, but she didn't. So I turned to her. What about you, Mom? What do you remember? It was like flipping a switch. She lifted her eyes for the first time that morning and rattled off every single detail like she'd lived it herself. The layout of the rental house, who slept where, the name of the restaurant we went to that first night. She even remembered Dad catching a small shark off the pier and the kind of beer he'd had at sunset. Those were his memories. Down to the bait shop name and the smell of the deck at night. Cold knot formed in my stomach. For the first time, it didn't just sound real. Felt real. But my brain refused to accept it. People don't just wake up in each other's bodies. That's not how the world works. At school, my chemistry teacher pulled me aside after class. She told me she'd referred me to the counseling office because I'd clearly been struggling. I felt a rush of embarrassment, but I was too tired to fight it. During lunch, I sat in a small office with a woman who introduced herself as Melanie Lawson. She had that calm, grounding energy that made the walls feel less like they were closing in. She asked what was going on, and I gave her the edited for sanity version. Family stress, trouble focusing, fight with my girlfriend. I didn't mention anything about swapped bodies or my parents losing their grip on reality. She didn't press. She just listened, nodding like this was something fixable. Then she helped me make a plan, scheduled my makeup chemistry test, gave me stress management tips, even handed me her office hours and extension number. For the first time in days, someone treated me like this was a normal problem, something solvable, and weirdly, that helped me breathe again. When I got home that afternoon, I heard clattering in the garage. Mom was in there surrounded by Dad's tools, holding a socket wrench like it was some alien artifact. She'd organized everything all wrong by size instead of type. All the screwdrivers together, all the wrenches in one pile. She looked frustrated, lost. And when she saw me standing in the doorway, she just shook her head and brushed past me into the house without saying a word. Inside, Dad was in the kitchen. And unlike this morning, he was in his element. He chopped vegetables with an ease that made my stomach twist. He hummed softly, lifted the lid of the rice cooker exactly like Mom always did, stirred with her familiar rhythm, seasoned everything with her go-to spice combo without looking. Watching him move around with her instincts was deeply unsettling, like watching a stranger wearing someone else's skin. My throat went tight. My hands wouldn't stay still. At dinner, the air was thick with tension. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I dropped my fork and asked, "Did anything else happen last Tuesday morning, besides just waking up wrong?" They both froze, guilt written all over their faces. The silence dragged until Dad finally spoke. "We started couples therapy the week before," he admitted quietly. Mom sighed and explained the assignment their therapist had given them. A week of switching roles. Dad was supposed to step up emotionally and help with household management. Mom was supposed to step back and let him handle more of the invisible labor. It was supposed to help them understand what the other person carried. Then, right in the middle of that experiment, they claimed they'd actually swapped bodies. For a brief, bright second, relief rushed through me. This made sense. No magic. No impossible explanations. Just a therapy exercise that got way too intense. Maybe they'd fallen into some psychological feedback loop. Maybe it was stress. But Dad shook his head. "It's not just the exercise," he said. "Something happened that morning. Something real." And just like that, the fragile hope I'd been clinging to crumbled. I stared at them. Two people sitting there looking miserable, like they'd been trapped in a nightmare together. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked. Mom looked down at her hands. "We were embarrassed," she said softly. "We didn't want you to worry about us." Dad nodded. "We thought we could handle it on our own." I felt frustration boiling up like a pressure cooker ready to blow. "You lied to me. You let me think I was losing my mind while you played house with someone else's personality. Do you know how terrifying that's been?" They both looked wrecked, but that didn't make the betrayal sting any less. If they'd lied about therapy, what else were they hiding? Mom insisted the swap was real. Dad backed her up, but I couldn't let myself believe it. Not fully. "I need to be alone," I said quietly, pushing back from the table. I went upstairs without looking back. I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at my phone, my chest heavy. Finally, I opened my messages with Haley. "I'm sorry. I've been distant and that's on me. Can we talk this weekend?" I hit send and just stared at the screen. Minutes dragged like hours. Then finally, one word lit up my screen. "Okay. Just okay." No heart. No smile. No follow-up. That tiny word felt heavier than everything else. I'd hurt something between us. Something I wasn't sure I could fix. Thursday morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee drifting through the house. A smell I hadn't associated with comfort in days. When I walked into the kitchen, Mom was there at the stove. Not sitting blankly at the table. Not ignoring the world. Actually moving. She looked up when she heard me and smiled. It wasn't the full, warm smile she used to give me when I was little, but it was the first crack of light I'd seen in a week. "Eggs or cereal?" she asked, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Eggs," I said quietly. She nodded and got to work, cracking eggs into the pan, asking about my day. Not in that absent, distracted tone either. She listened. We even talked about my history project and whether I'd finished my English homework. For a few minutes, I felt something I hadn't felt all week. Normalcy. Fragile but real. Then Dad came down. The second he saw me, his face shifted into full emotional support mode. He hovered by the counter, asking if I was okay, how I'd slept, if I needed to process last night's feelings. I tried to keep my answers short, but he just kept going. "Are you sure? Because it's really important to talk through hard things." "I'm fine," I snapped. He reached out and touched my shoulder again. The gentle concern that used to feel rare and comforting was suddenly suffocating. Finally, I turned and told him straight, "I need space. You hovering is making everything worse." The words landed like a punch. His face crumpled, but he nodded slowly, like someone deflating. "Okay," he whispered, stepping back into the living room. I felt bad, but I could finally breathe again. At school, I went straight to the counseling office during my free period. Melanie spotted me and waved me in with that calm, warm smile that didn't feel fake. I sat down and told her, again the edited version. My parents were going through something serious. Things at home were stressful. I left out the part where something serious might involve body swapping. She listened without judging, without trying to fix what she didn't understand. Then she suggested family therapy. Real, structured help. She even handed me referral cards for family therapists in town. I wasn't sure my parents would actually go for it. They'd already kept their couples therapy a secret, but I pocketed the cards anyway. It was the first plan that felt possible. Melanie told me I could come talk to her anytime, and even though it didn't solve anything, I walked out of that office feeling a little less alone. In chemistry, I forced myself to stay locked in on the lecture. I scribbled down notes, asked questions, even raised my hand. Not because I suddenly cared about stoichiometry, but because I needed to remind myself I was still me. After class, my teacher came up to me, smiling gently. "I scheduled your makeup test for Tuesday," she said. "It's good to see you back in it." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of pride. A single part of my life wasn't completely unraveling. After school, I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, feeling the weight of home pressing down before I even got there. Instead of turning toward the house, I just drove. No destination, just streets I knew, trees blurring past the windows, music low enough that I could hear my own breathing. I ended up at the park where Haley and I had our first date last spring. The bench where we'd eaten ice cream. The pond with the ducks she'd insisted on naming. Back then, my biggest worry was if she liked me as much as I liked her. Now my parents were falling apart, my girlfriend barely wanted to talk to me, and I didn't even trust my own sense of reality. I missed simple. I missed before. When I finally walked into the house, both my parents were waiting for me in the living room. That alone was enough to make my stomach twist. "Sweetheart," Dad started, standing up too fast. "We need to tell you something else." My heart sank. "Of course you do," I muttered under my breath, dropping my backpack onto the floor. Mom leaned forward, hands clasped together. She looked scared but present. "I've been feeling foggy," she began. "Not just because of the role reversal thing. Like my thoughts are stuck in mud and I can't grab them." Then she dropped the real bomb. She'd started a new anxiety medication 2 weeks ago. She hadn't connected it to everything else because she just hadn't thought about it. Her doctor prescribed it for stress at work. But ever since she started, she'd been feeling spaced out, forgetful, disconnected. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. A real medical explanation. Something tangible I could hold on to. I asked her why she hadn't said anything to her doctor. Her shoulders sagged. She admitted she thought the side effects would pass, and she didn't want to seem difficult or ungrateful for the help. She said she was embarrassed. Dad rubbed his face and let out a shaky breath. He said watching her drift away like that had terrified him. That's why he'd started overcompensating, trying to take care of everything, filling in the cracks she was leaving behind. But it only made everything worse. Looking at them, I saw it clearly. Mom stuck in her fog, Dad trapped in panic mode, both drowning in their own fear, too scared to actually face the real issue together. And I was caught in the middle. I stood up, my voice steady for the first time in days. "We're calling Mom's doctor, tonight, and we're doing that family therapy Melanie suggested. This," I gestured between them, "isn't something we can handle on our own anymore." For a second, neither of them spoke. Then they both looked up at me like someone had thrown them a lifeline. Dad nodded immediately. Mom gave a quiet, fragile okay. I handed her the phone with the doctor's number pulled up. Her hands were shaking, but she dialed anyway. When she came back, she said the office was closed, but she'd left a message about the side effects and asked for a call first thing in the morning. I told them both to go to bed. They looked exhausted, like maybe they'd finally run out of ways to pretend they were in control. That night, lying in the dark, I felt two things tangled together in my chest. Anger that it had taken this long to get here, and relief that for once, we had real steps to take. For the first time in weeks, tomorrow didn't feel entirely hopeless. Friday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with a new message. It was from Mom. Doctor's office called back. Emergency appointment today at 2:30. I stared at the screen for a second, not sure how to feel. Relief, maybe, or hope. Two feelings I hadn't let myself touch in a while. When I went downstairs, both my parents were already in the kitchen. They looked nervous, hands fidgeting, eyes a little tired, but more present than they'd been in days. "I can skip school and go with you," I offered, surprising even myself. Mom shook her head gently. "No, honey, I need to do this myself. Dad's coming with me." A little part of me stung at that, but a bigger part felt relieved. I didn't have to sit in a doctor's office, pretending I wasn't terrified. I grabbed breakfast, trying to keep things light, and headed to school with this quiet flicker of hope glowing somewhere deep in my chest. In chemistry class, I actually paid attention. Really paid attention. Took notes, raised my hand, and when my teacher passed my desk, she gave me this small, proud smile like she'd noticed the shift. At lunch, I sat alone in the corner, habit now, but then Haley slid into the seat across from me. She had this cautious expression, like she wasn't sure which version of me she'd be talking to today. "Are you ready to actually talk this time?" she asked softly. I put my sandwich down and nodded. I told her about the chaos at home. Not the surreal body swap stuff, but the emotional truth beneath it. That things were bad. That I'd been overwhelmed and shut down. That it wasn't about her. She listened the whole time, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to be here for you, but you can't keep shutting me out every time something goes wrong. You have to let me in." I promised I'd try. Not a perfect promise, but a real one. We agreed to go slow, talk more, keep the walls down. When she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, it felt like some of the weight on my chest finally lifted. The rest of the school day blurred by. I kept checking my phone like a clock stuck on refresh. When I finally walked through the door that afternoon, Mom and Dad were sitting at the kitchen table, both looking exhausted, but different. Lighter, clearer. The doctor says the medication was causing it, Dad explained, voice steadier than it had been in weeks. The fog, the memory problems, all of it. Mom nodded slowly, her eyes clearer than I'd seen them in days. They're switching me to something new, and I'm seeing a psychiatrist for longer-term treatment. They also told me the doctor recommended family therapy to help us recover from everything. Hearing that, a real diagnosis, a real plan, actual steps forward, made something unclench in my chest. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for pushing us to get help." It was such a strange feeling, this mix of pride for being the one who made something happen, and sadness that I'd had to. The weekend was different, gentle. We treated each other like fragile glass, but not out of fear, out of care. Mom was adjusting to the new medication and warned it would take a few days to fully settle, but she was already more present, asking about my day, actually hearing my answers. Dad was still picking up more emotional slack than usual, but the frantic edge was gone. He wasn't hovering like a lifeguard anymore, just being there. Saturday night, we ordered pizza and watched a movie together. No pretending nothing had happened, just being quiet, soft, together. Sunday evening, 6 p.m., we walked into Althea Padilla's office for our first family therapy session. The room was warm, softly lit, with cushy chairs and walls painted in calming colors. She greeted us with kind eyes that made my nerves ease. Just a little. She asked us each to explain what had been happening. I went first. I told her how my parents' personalities had flipped like someone had pressed a switch, how terrifying it had been to watch. Mom followed, talking about the fog and how disconnected she'd felt. Dad explained the couple's therapy assignment, the role reversal, and how everything got tangled together. Althea listened without judgment, nodding slowly, taking notes. When we finished, she leaned forward and explained what she saw. She said it wasn't one big impossible thing, it was several smaller things colliding. Mom's new medication had caused cognitive fog, making her feel strange in her own skin. At the same time, Dad had been doing his couples therapy role reversal homework, intentionally behaving out of character. Put those two things together and both of them felt wrong. And when the human brain can't make sense of something, sometimes it invents explanations, even impossible ones. Hearing her say it out loud didn't erase the chaos of the last 2 weeks, but it made it make sense. Mom and Dad both nodded, relief flickering across their faces like someone finally turned on the light in a dark room. Before we left, Althea gave us homework. Clear communication, no more blurring therapy exercises with real life. Just be yourselves, she told them gently. They looked embarrassed, but also like they'd been waiting to hear that. Monday morning, I woke up feeling different, not fixed, not perfect, but lighter. I got to school early to check in about my chemistry makeup test. Sitting in that quiet testing room, I actually focused. Not perfectly, but enough. When I handed the test in, my teacher smiled at me. "Good to see you back," she said, and I realized she was right. Later that day, I stopped by Melanie's office. I told her about the doctor, the therapy, the way things were finally starting to turn around. She smiled and told me she was proud of me for stepping up, for helping my family find support when everything felt impossible. At lunch, I sat across from Haley at our usual table. We didn't talk about trauma or panic or family chaos. We talked about college essays, her fight with her parents, and how she might apply early decision. I listened, really listened. When she squeezed my hand again, it didn't feel like she was comforting someone broken. It felt like we were finding our way back to us. That week, I started noticing small changes in Mom. Tiny things at first, but they hit harder than any dramatic moment. Tuesday morning, she asked about my chemistry test. Not a generic, "How was it?" but specific questions. She actually remembered the details when I told her. Wednesday, she slipped a note into my lunch like she used to when I was little. Just a dumb little doodle of a cat with a speech bubble that said, "Good luck, genius." Thursday night, she was the one who brought up college applications, not me trying to drag her into the conversation. And by Friday, she wasn't just present. She felt alive again, like someone had opened a window inside her and let the air back in. That night after dinner, she pulled me aside. There were tears in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "I'm sorry I scared you," she said. "I didn't realize how bad it got until you made us face it. Thank you." When I hugged her, it wasn't the distant, fogged-over version of my mom anymore. It was her, the real her. Dad changed too, but in the opposite direction. He stopped hovering, stopped treating me like a glass figurine that would shatter if he didn't check in every 5 minutes. Monday night, we watched TV in silence, the kind of easy quiet that used to be our language. He wasn't overcompensating anymore. He was just Dad. By Wednesday, we were side by side watching a nature documentary. No awkward hovering, no emotional interrogation, just being. And I realized how much I'd missed that. Sunday evening, we had our second session with Althea Padilla. She had us do an active listening exercise. One person talked, the others had to repeat what they heard before responding. At first it felt forced, like we were reading lines in a bad school play. But then, it started working. We actually heard each other. Dad admitted he should have told me about the therapy assignment from the start. Mom admitted she should have spoken up about the medication side effects right away. And I admitted I should have asked for help instead of trying to carry everything alone. Althea smiled and said we'd made real progress. She pushed our next session out 2 weeks instead of 1. It felt like someone quietly saying, "You're getting stronger now." The following Tuesday, Mom saw the psychiatrist her doctor had referred her to. She came home tired but hopeful. Over dinner, she explained that this doctor actually listened, really listened. They switched her to a new medication that shouldn't make her feel trapped in that mental fog again. Later, as we washed dishes together, she said softly, "I feel like I'm waking up," and she really was. 2 weeks after everything had blown up, I was sitting in the living room doing calculus homework when Mom walked in with a mug of tea. Honey and lemon, exactly how I liked it. She didn't ask. She just knew. She set it beside me, sat on the couch with her own tea, and opened her book. No big speeches. No drama. Just quiet. And I felt my throat tighten, because that tiny act meant everything. Saturday morning, Dad woke me up early. "Fishing?" he asked like he used to. We hadn't gone in months. Out by the lake we set up on the dock. Lines cast. Water calm. Not a lot of talking. Just that easy silence that used to define us. On the way home, Dad turned down the radio. "Thank you," he said, voice low, "for pushing us. I'm sorry you had to be the adult when we weren't." I told him it was okay. I was just glad to have them back. He reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Just that simple touch felt more like my dad than all the emotional talks he tried to force before. The next Friday, I invited Haley over for dinner. I was way more nervous than I wanted to admit. But when she walked in, everything was normal. Mom made her classic lasagna. Dad set the table. They asked about her college plans and soccer season. They didn't overdo it or act stiff. They were just my parents. And she was just Haley. After she left, Mom joined me in the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher. She put away leftovers quietly, then said, "It's really nice to see you happy again." And she was right. I was happy. For the first time in weeks. At our third session with Althea, we didn't talk about panic or confusion or impossible explanations. We talked about what we'd learned. Mom admitted she'd stopped trusting herself. Dad said he'd been so focused on fixing everything, he forgot to actually listen. I admitted I'd tried too hard to hold everything together alone. Althea said that was the kind of growth she hoped families would reach. She suggested moving to monthly sessions, a sign she believed we could handle things on our own now. A month after everything fell apart, we sat at the dinner table on a regular Tuesday night. Mom asked about my college essay. Dad cracked a dumb joke. Mom rolled her eyes. I laughed. We talked about weekend plans, groceries, TV, ordinary things. I looked at them and realized how close we'd come to losing all of this. Not because of some supernatural disaster, but because we were too scared to tell the truth and too proud to ask for help. But we'd clawed our way back to real. Messy, imperfect, honest real. And that was enough.
Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.